How's it going, YouTube? Mike here. So as promised, I'm doing a part two of my flight training uh, review today. And today's video is going to be based purely on the costs. And just a full disclaimer, the information I'm going to share with you today, it's not any national statistic or anything like that. This is purely based on my own personal experience, and the numbers that I have is purely on my own personal experience. So you can take it or leave it, but this hopefully should help you if you are currently in the process of getting a pilot's license or you're thinking about it. Here are the things you should consider. For my training, I spent a total of $29,800, approximately that much, and that includes my airplane rental, instructor fees, all the other fees like medical, examination, books, materials, things like that. And it took me 143 hours before Checkride. Well, after Checkride. So after my Checkride, I was about 143 hours. Okay. So things you should consider when you are preparing either for training, either you're getting a sports pilot license or a private pilot. Oh, and I should mention these numbers are specific to a private pilot license. That's the license that I have. If you're getting a sports pilot, you'll probably spend significantly less, maybe half of this. And what I would say is you should budget. So it took me 143 hours to complete my training. And if you saw my last video, I did mention a few nicks and knacks that that made my training a lot longer than it should be. So for you, you can avoid those things. What I would say is, because I remember initially I only budgeted about 50 to 75 hours in terms of cost, and I didn't even budget all the extra costs that would come with my training. I only mainly budgeted the rental for the airplane and the instructor fees, but you need to budget for all the little extra costs. So based on my numbers, I would say budget around $3,000 for additional stuff. So, and that would include your check ride, your materials like headset, books, navigation stuff like your chart, your plotter, your calculator, things like that. So I would budget approximately just $3,000 separate for that, and you may not even spend all three. So I would budget that, and then what I would also do, when you go to a school, when you sit down with someone, they typically tell you, well, here are the requirements for a private pilot license. You need 40 hours at least of flight training, and so on and so forth. But what's likely is that you're going to be spending more time to get your license, okay? So I would budget for 90 hours. Now, it's likely that you'll get done before 90 hours. A lot of people have gotten done before 90 or even before 80 or 70. But I would budget for 90 hours just to be safe. Now, also remember that your costs, how expensive your training will be, will very much depend on the aircraft that you're flying and also the distance. So for example, also your location. So for example, I live in California and everything is expensive out here. If I was training somewhere, say in the East Coast or maybe in the South, like Georgia or Texas, I would probably be spending significantly less on the airplane rental. Or if I was training with a Cessna 172 or 152, whatever have you. So that would you should consider that the type of aircraft that you're going to train in. The reason why I went in for a Diamond Star was because I read the stats on the airplane and all the accident reports and things like that, and that airplane is actually significantly safer in terms of the stats, and that's why I decided to learn with the Diamond Star. Now, a lot of people train in Cessnas, and I would definitely recommend it if that's what you can afford. So the airplane that you are flying will significantly affect your costs. So for me, if I'm paying 145 an hour, you could be paying $90 an hour to rent a different airplane. Just make sure that whatever airplane in school that you are, that make sure that they're keeping up with the maintenance of the aircraft and that it's airworthy So you want to, those things you have to be concerned about. So next thing I would say, so the aircraft that you're flying, and also the location. Again, this is something I didn't even think about much when I was looking for a flight school. If I could change anything right now, I would definitely change the proximity of my travel distance. So, like I said in my last video, on days where there were a lot of traffic, I would be spending 4 to 5 hours just on the road, just driving back and forth here. So, and when you think about that, and I'll get to that later. So, think of 4 to 6 hours to go to train and come back. That's a lot of time, and you're spending gas money, and you're also food and all this little extra stuff. So, best thing I would say, if you can find a school that's within, I would say 20 to 30 minutes from you, that's probably your best bet. If you have to drive an hour or more, again, depending on where you are, in California, things are expensive and there's crap load of traffic, especially in LA. There's every hour is rush hour out here, so definitely consider that. All right, your traveling distance will also affect your costs. Now, the most important cost, believe it or not, besides monetary, is your time. Okay, and I mentioned a little bit of this in my last video. The time that you commit to this. So, for example, towards the ending of my training, I was flying approximately maybe 2 days a week. So, say I was flying Tuesdays and Thursdays. I would usually get out around 9 or 10 a.m. and I would not get back here or home until like some days 6 or 7 p.m. So I would be gone for a good 10 hours out of the day. And half of that sometimes is just on the road. So again, that's why you have to consider your time. And the reason why I say that is, think of it this way. If you say your hourly pay is $100 an hour, okay? You get paid $100 an hour, and you have to be on the road 5 hours out of the day every time you go to training. That's $500. That's $500. Just think about that for a minute, because a lot of times we don't calculate how much time we're actually putting in. So think about your time and how much your time is also costing you. All right. So because when I think about my experience, if I would put a real monetary value on, the total cost of my flight training, it would probably be more than 30 grand when I think of all the time that I spent on the road and whatnot. So again, please keep that in mind when you choose a school. You want to choose something closer to you, or if you live in a city that's fairly, there's good traffic. So I mean, you can. I've been to Maryland where driving to friggin', if I drove 30 miles, it could be like 30 minutes drive compared to out here. So again, it depends on your location, but the better traffic in your city, the farther I guess you can have your school. But it's always best to be in close proximity. Even if you can just ride a bicycle there, that would be great. You can save a lot of money that way. So I'm just gonna go through a breakdown of all of my cost here. I have a list in front of me, and so I have my total cost, like I told you, at 29,800. And here's the breakdown. The aircraft is 145 an hour. The instructor is $49 an hour. My gas, when I calculate the gas, and gas and lunch, that's approximately $10 every hour that I'm training. My headset, I spent $1,100 on my headset. Charts, so I had to buy 4 different charts, and then that's another thing. If you are able to get done within a year for your training, that would be great. So some additional little costs. So for me, for example, my charts expired while I was training, so I had to get 4 of them, and charts are like only about $8 each. So, but if I had gotten done within a year, I didn't need to spend the extra $16. So charts, and also the school had a membership fee, where you get a discount on the rental for the airplane. So I had to pay that twice also because again, my training extended over 1 year, and the cost for that was $50 a year, I believe. Um, and then, like I said, my books, I spent approximately $100 on books. Now, what I would advise is it's always good to have your own reading materials. But one thing I was lucky about is that I had, at the school, I met a lot of other people who were training and people who were getting their licenses ahead of me. I was able to borrow some of their reading materials and use that instead, especially towards my check ride. Instead of having to buy a ton of books, I just bought the important ones that I know I needed, and then I borrowed a few from friends. So you can always do that. Um, my calculator, uh, that cost $60, and you can always get that cheaper depending on where you buy it. My plotter was 15. Your logbook, you need a logbook when you are training, so that's about 12 or 15 bucks. And my medical, 80 bucks. My written exam, 150. My check ride, 750. And what I would say also, I know I talked a little bit, well, a lot about the time because it's so important, guys. Trust me, the time that you commit to this is so important. What I would do, or what I would encourage you to do, again, based on my experience, is when you go to training, say again, you dedicate 2 days out of your week to go to training. When you go to training, I would also dedicate at least 2 additional hours outside of those 2 days to try and catch up with your training. And that could be, updating yourself on where you are, studying, definitely studying a lot. And what I would also say to you is whenever you go to training, the better prepared that you are when you go, the better for you. The faster an instructor can train you, the faster your training is going to move. So, for example, and one thing I would say in my experience early on, I didn't, I shut myself in the foot because, again, because of my schedule, I would get to school and then try to catch up on things. Also, one thing I remember, with my first instructor, a lot of times I would be given materials to read. Like he would tell me, read up on stalls, right? And I would spend the time and read up on it. But then when I show up for training the next time, either we don't even do stalls, or what I expected was I would be asked questions or whatever have. Basically, we would go over whatever it is I read, but my training didn't go like that, where I would be asked to read something, but we never went through it. So again, keep that in mind when you're choosing your instructor. It's always good that you get a follow up. If they ask you to read up on something, make sure that that's the actual thing that you're going to learn the next time you practice. Because when you read up on stalls and then you get to training and then you're doing steep turns instead, or you're doing some other maneuvers that you know, so keep up with that. Another thing I would like to touch on is, again, from my experience, for example, there's a ACS, which is what your check ride is going to be tested on. It used to be the PTS, I believe, but now it's called the ACS. What I would advise you to do from day one of your training, get that book, get the ACS, because all of your training is going to be based on that. This is what you're going to be tested on at the end of the day. So what I would do is get the ACS, and then you can try to build like a learning syllabus from that. Again, because that's what you're going to be tested on. So try to work with and communicate this with your instructor, because again, they're the one teaching you, so you can go to them, have them, you both create a proper working syllabus where this week we're going to learn so and so. Next week we're going to learn XYZ. The upper week we're going to learn XYZ. And again, all of this, how fast things move, will very much depend on you, how prepared you are, and also your own learning curve. And like I said before, we all going to learn differently. So don't beat yourself up if you're not getting something, so much. And what I would always also say is that in the beginning of your training, it's going to feel very overwhelming because so much stuff is going to be thrown at you. So be prepared for that, and always eat. Always eat before you go to training or before you go to fly. So yes, I would get the ACS. To me, that is the most important thing you should get in the beginning of your training. And again, work with your instructor to create some type of working or training schedule. And that way you're able to hold both yourself and the instructor accountable. So say for example, you are on week 5, and remember those 2 additional hours I said to have. That's when you go through your working syllabus and see, okay, where are we at in my training? Okay, what I did, I didn't have a syllabus. I didn't have any type of checklist. I just left everything in the hands of the school and the instructor. And again, when you do that, what that means is also they control your costs at the end of the day. But if you want to really have control of how much you're spending, you want to have sort of your own checklist and a working syllabus where you can work together with whoever's teaching you how to fly, and you guys go through week by week. Okay, where are we? We've already completed this. I understand this well. Let's move to the next thing. I believe that if you do that, you're going to be done way, way ahead of, 143 hours, much more further than that. So I would say that definitely that's a good thing to have. Have a working syllabus and then update. I would say every 5 to 10 flights or every 5 to 10 hours, I would go through that checklist or the syllabus or the ACS, whichever it is that you use. And then every 5 to 10 hours of flight training, I would go through that and see, okay, where are we? Do I understand this? And then again, you communicate all these things with your instructor, and trust me, that will serve you well. And last thing I would try to suggest to you is, if there's any type of scholarship or any type of programs you can sign up for where you can get free money to learn how to fly, you should definitely take advantage of that. That's one. And two, actually from my last video, somebody left a comment about this. You can go there and read their comment, where you join like a flight club or a pilot club where they have lower rental fees or whatever have you. So if you have something like that in your community or in your city, you can definitely be a part of some program where it's going to save you some money in the long run. But other than that, everything that I had listed, some things you can take out of what I'm saying in terms of being ahead. Just like, when you start your training, one thing your instructor will tell you is, to be a safe pilot, you always have to be ahead of the airplane. You have to be way ahead of the airplane. The same thing with your training. Don't let the training be ahead of you. Be ahead of your own training, and hold your instructor accountable. Don't just respect whoever is teaching you, but also communicate with them, and you guys update each other what your status is. If you just leave them to be the one running the show, again, you might get a really good instructor. Not everyone is perfect, or you might get some shady instructor, or you might get just a normal instructor and the thing is, when you think of flight training, it's not like a school or academics where you would go through stuff based on chapters in a book, and then you get tested on them, which to me, that's how it should be. That way you sort of know where you stand. But you can sort of curate that into your own thing, where again, you have your own syllabus and your checklist, and you update yourself and also update the instructor, so both of you know where you stand and you know what you need to learn. And do not let them drag the process for you. And another thing to consider is, flight training can come with some frustration, because there will be things that you can't control, specifically weather. If it's gloomy outside, if it's cloudy, if it's raining, whatever it is, there are days where, and again, some schools may be different in terms of how they schedule their flight training. In the school that I train in at SoCal, you have to schedule ahead of time, and then you only have 48 hours to cancel. Okay? If you don't cancel within 48 hours, you're responsible for that flight time. And even if except the weather is really bad, that's when the school would cancel themselves for safety reasons. But you want to just have that in mind, because there will be days where the weather is not so good and you're supposed to train, you just have to take it in and not fly. You can use that time to study or do some groundwork. So that would be the last thing I would say, but I really hope this video helps somebody. And please leave your comments and ask questions. There's obviously a lot more I can talk about, but want to keep this video as short as possible, even though it's probably pretty long. So, but you can ask questions, whatever I didn't cover that you feel that I can answer for you, just ask in the comment area and I'll try my best to answer. But yeah, that's it, guys. I really hope, again, that somebody learned something from this. And if you are planning to be a pilot, definitely be cost effective. You know, it doesn't have to cost you $30,000 to get your pilot license. It should cost you a lot less than that. Okay, hope you learn from my mistakes. So until next video, I'm gonna talk to you guys later.